Iraq was done handing its oil to the West. New leaders promised to take it back and make the nation rich. But the last country that tried that, Iran, the CIA took them out in no time at all. Then came a man who wouldn't back down, and he'd stop at nothing to win. This is how Iraq tried to defy the world and what it cost them. This is General Karim Abdul Qasim. He's president of Iraq in 1960 after a coup, and a year later he's looking to shake things up. Sick of the dominance of American, Dutch and British companies in their precious oil reserves, the fifth largest on earth, he wants to nationalize the industry. But the true start of this went even further back and started in Saudi Arabia, not Iraq. With the discovery of whole oceans of oil in Arabia, Persia and other places in the Middle East, in the early 20th century, the economics of the world shifted, and along with them, the power plays. Not many in Britain or America cared what happened in places like Iraq and Saudi Arabia before the 1900s. Neither of these countries even existed before the early 20th century, but that's the story for another day. Until this point, the Ottomans had been in charge, but as their power in the region crumbled and oil was found, opportunistic Westerners suddenly cared about it. They offered deals to corrupt governments to take on the exploration work and gain a monopoly on oil if they found it. To be clear, it wasn't easy or cheap to find oil. It needed deep pockets. Pockets so deep that even some of the richest people in the world could barely afford it. But find it, they did. But they certainly found a whole lot of oil. Now they had access to what seemed like unlimited amounts of oil, and therefore money, with the governments in these places receiving a small slice. As time went on and oil became more and more important to the world economy, people in these places started to question the fairness of these deals. And with the true emergence of the USSR post-World War II, the USA feared them muscling in on their cash cows. So in 1951, they reluctantly offered Saudi Arabia a 50% split on profits. A similar deal followed for Iran in 1952, after overthrowing their democratically elected government in a coup anyway. Next up demanding change was Iraq, who got a similar deal too. Everyone was happy, right? Not so fast. It was the 1950s, which were a bit of a volatile time. But 1952 in particular was a very interesting year, with the Egyptian revolution having effects well beyond its borders. This is Gamal Abdel Nasser, the president of Egypt after the revolution, and he was an inspiration to much of the Arab world. After the Suez Crisis of 1956, where Britain, France and Israel tried and ultimately failed to force Nasser to accept foreign interference, the direction of change was clear. The Arab world knew it could break the chains. And it's in this context, even with a 50% split in profit, that General Karim Abdul Qasim, the president of Iraq in 1961, signs a law taking full control of oil production in their country. But it wasn't quite that simple. The USA was not happy, but they weren't going to attempt a coup like they had in Iran almost 10 years before. They were willing to play the long game, but so was Qasim. Although the law was signed in 1961, it made no difference to begin with. The colonial powers held one key advantage. They had all the expertise, infrastructure and equipment. The Iraqis were in no position to take over all of this overnight, nor the Saudis or Iranians for that matter. The colonial countries had built this inequality into the deals. The American, Dutch and British companies operating under the Iraq Petroleum Company, IPC for short, start to sue the government for breach of contract. This starts to jam up and slow down the nationalization process. Enough that Iraq becomes a very dangerous place to be. So dangerous that Qasim himself is assassinated. He's replaced by someone of the Ba'athist party, who we'll go deeper on another day. They themselves are then toppled in a coup. But finally, in 1968, 7 years after that law was signed, the Ba'athists finally take control of Iraq. Qasim and those who followed him in the chaos had managed to slowly but surely remove foreign control from the oil-producing regions. Just one remained, North Rumaila, a place that will keep coming up in this story. But seeing the writing on the wall, the IPC, who are effectively the representatives of the colonial powers, finally give up. Well, kind of. They leave knowing that Iraq doesn't have the expertise, knowing they'll lose out. They leave out of spite. But don't forget, this is all a colonial power play. The USA, UK and Netherlands may be gone, but there are others out there willing to do a deal. You may think it would be the USSR, and they are certainly involved. But the way that Iraq keeps the oil flowing is via France. The French company ERAP is brought in to manage the production. They will eventually become known as Total, but this is purely a technical support contract, not an extraction one. And in 1969, the USSR gives them 140 million to get started in North Rumaila, and production starts there over the next few years. Coming out of the 1970s, Iraq has come out of this really well. But although the foreign companies had stopped providing technical support, they hadn't given up on their profits. They had the right to extract that oil. And so negotiations continue between both sides, with the Iraqi side led by a young Saddam Hussein, the deputy leader of the Ba'athist Party. But after 2 years, tough negotiations, Saddam decides enough is enough. They start to nationalize everything. Britain and the USA do what they do. They ostracize Iraq, make it difficult for them to sell their oil. The colonial power play continues. The USSR gives them money and markets to sell to, so they can weather the storm. And by 1979, Iraq has reached 4 million barrels extracted per day, the most they had ever done. Everything is set up for them to do well. But then Saddam, now in full control of the country, scores a series of own goals that would lead to his death and the USA destroying his country. Having finally taken control of the oil in Iraq and the riches that came with it, what should a young dictator do when he's bored? Settle old scores, obviously. In 1979, the Iranian Revolution happens, and Saddam senses blood. He wants to move the border between the countries slightly to give Iraq better access to the Persian Gulf. All the better to export oil. It's always about oil when it comes to Iraq. Catching Iran off guard, they make a storming start, taking territory and winning battles. It's almost too easy. Iran under Ayatollah Khamenei realizes it's in a battle for its survival. The revolution itself is under threat. Back comes the colonial power play. The Cold War is still raging, and so the USA is looking for someone to back. The Iranian hostage crisis is still going on, and they offer Iran military parts for the release of them. Iran refuses. So they look to cozy up to Saddam. They offer weapons. They even come with an offer of supplies from Israel. Iraq says yes to the USA and no to Israel. Small side note, Israel was very flexible in this war. They offered to back both sides. They wanted an ally one way or another. TLDR, they help Iran a lot and hope that that means Iran will be nice. It doesn't. But then the tide turns in the war. Iran pushes Iraq back to their border by 1982. Iran could look to get peace now, but they want to get rid of Saddam, and so do some other people. Midway through the war, the USA decides to back both sides, and very secretly and kind of off the books starts funding and supplying Iran. This is the famous Iran-Contra scandal under Reagan. All of this external help just delays the end of the war. Iraq's defenses are good. In fact, both sides' defenses are good, but their offenses aren't so much. It's kind of like the start of World War I. But eventually, after 8 long years of war, a peace that resets everything back to the start of the war takes effect. By the end of the 1970s, Iraq had seemingly done the impossible, taking control of its oil, defying the West, and making billions in the process. But by the end of the 1980s, things aren't so rosy for dear old Iraq. The end of the war came with debt, enemies, and one leader too arrogant to stop. Because when Saddam invaded Kuwait in 1990, the world's most powerful empire suddenly took notice. And that's where we'll pick up next time, when the USA decides that Iraq's oil must flow no matter the cost.